Hello my stitching friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video you will learn how to perform 10 different stitches for lettering in hand embroidery. If you are new here, hello, my name is Natalie, I'm an embroidery artist and I love sharing my skills with everyone to enjoy. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I make useful embroidery tutorials for beginners and intermediate stitchers. Alright, let's get stitching! Let's start stitching letters using back stitch. It's one of the most simple stitches for letters. I use the biggest needle from my set, number 3. And I will use those cute variated threads from Cosmo Seasons. If you don't want to have huge knots on the back side, you can start stitching from far away knot method. To perform a back stitch, make a single straight stitch as long or short as you want. Continue along your pattern line, but come up a space ahead and bring your needle back down into the same hole, at the end of the last stitch you made. Here is a tip, equal spaces are important. You can mark it with dots using heated erasable pen. If the curve becomes small, you would need to change gradually the length of the stitches. You need to make them smaller so that your curve becomes smoother. Also, instead of jumping far away, I like to do running stitch and then fill it back so it looks like back stitch. This way your back side will look neat. Continue along the lines until you finish the letters. If you enjoy watching this video tutorial, please give it thumbs up and don't be shy, comment below if you have any questions or suggestions. I always look for your comments and reply, cause I love to chat with you guys. I like this fun and colorful effect that gives me those variated threads. And this is how I finish my threads on the back side. I make a loop and fix the thread and hide the ends under the stitches. I cut the far away knot and finish this thread same way. Let's move to the next stitch, and this is swept back stitch. This is a great way to embellish a line of back stitch, adding thickness, texture or some extra color. Start with the back stitch for entire board. And then slide the needle under each back stitch. Repeat the process until you are done whipping for all letters. You can use the needle with a blind tip so it will not split the existing stitches and fabric. I use two contrasting thread colors because I like this way, but you can use the same color and the lines will look smooth. If you want to get this sampler, you can find it on my Etsy shop. This is a part of my Big Stitching Along project, and you can also join and stitch with me. For more information, please check the description below. Let's move to the split stitch. Split stitch is one of the basic stitches and it's very easy to learn and it's perfect for outlining. First, make a single straight stitch as long or short as you want. Bring your needle up in the same place if you would do for back stitch. Then bring your needle down through the center of that stitch you just made. Continue along your pattern line, but come up a space ahead and bring up your needle back down into the previous stitch by splitting it in the middle. If the line is curved, try to make shorter stitches. If you have straight lines, you can make them longer. Just follow the lines and curves you have in your pattern. There are two ways you can work split stitch: bringing the needle up by splitting the stitch from the back side, or bringing your needle down from the front, like I usually do. Just try both ways and choose what is more comfortable for you. The result is the same. I like to do back split stitch because it's easier for me to split the stitch from the top, and I can also move the previous stitch a bit for curved lines, and it helps to create a smooth shape. Here's a few things to keep in mind. If you do split stitch from the back side, you will use less threads rather if you do splitting from the top. So just keep it in mind, especially if you use variated threads, because the colors can change faster for the back split stitch method. You can also use different numbers of threads for split stitch. It depends on the size of your letters. Stem stitch is also one of the most common and basic embroidery stitches, and here is how to work stem stitch. Bring your needle up through the fabric just above the marked line of your pattern. Insert the needle one stitch length away from it and just below the pattern line. Come back up a little less than halfway, just above the line. Repeat this process, going back down just below the line. Keep your thread on one side during your stitching, outside of the curve. And in case if the curve changes, you can switch to another side, just like I did for this S letter. Stem stitch is easy to work along a straight or curved line, making it suitable for so many embroidery designs. The stitch creates a thin line and can be used to outline embroidered shapes, to form a flower and plant stems, and more. I like using stem stitch for lettering. It's easy and fast. Let's do this chain stitch. Chain stitch is basic embroidery stitch and is very versatile. It forms a line of interlocking loops that are commonly used to create outlines, borders, and decorative elements. Chain stitch can be also used for filling. For this lettering, I used 6 strands of Cosmo Seasons variated floss. Start by bringing the needle up through the fabric where you want to begin your stitch. Hold the thread down with your non-dominant hand to keep it in place on the side. Then go back down into the same hole before you pull the thread all the way through. Leave the loop and come up again in another place on the line depending on how big you want to make this chain stitch. Pull the thread way up through the loop and tight a bit. Be careful not to pull the thread too tight or it will pucker the fabric. Continue the same way along the line, each time passing the needle through the loop created by the previous stitch. Keep the stitches even in size and spacing for a neat, uniform appearance. You can start making it from left to right to left, wherever you feel comfortable. When you need to end the line, you just make a teeny anchor stitch right after your last stitch outside of the loop. And that will secure your last chain stitch. Here is a little tip. You need to make the distance between stitches the same across the line, so your chain stitch will look consistent. Try to tighten the thread for each stitch the same way, so your chain stitches have the same size. Did you know that you can do a chain stitch backwards? It's called reversed chain stitch, also known as broad stitch. Start by making one short stitch. It's the same anchor stitch that you did for finishing a usual chain stitch, but for reverse chain stitch you are starting from the end. Come up in another place on the line, depending how big you want to make the stitch. Slide under the first anchor stitch and go back down into the same hole. You need to go with your needle between the thread and fabric without splitting anything. You can use a blind-ended tapestry needle if you're constantly splitting the thread or fabric. Or slide using the needle eye side. It will also work well. Then continue the same way along the line, each time sliding the needle through the previous chain stitch. Keep the stitches even in size and spacing for a neat uniform appearance. You can slide between the previous stitch from one side or another, it doesn't matter. The result will be the same. Just do it the way you feel comfortable. Try to use variated or multicolored threads and practice the stitch in different directions. From right to left and from left to right, the final look is completely the same as a traditional chain stitch. Some people even like it more than usual one, because it's comfortable to stitch this way. Try both versions and let me know in the comments, which do you like the most. Brick stitch. Brick stitch is a variation of back stitch for filling. You can use it to fill spaces in your hand embroidery design. The method of embroidering letters using a brick stitch is simple and it looks best with 6 strands of loss. If you already know how to do a regular back stitch, you can stitch those letters easily. The final look of brick stitch filling depends on how long you make your stitches. I like the top version with shorter stitches, it really looks like a brick wall. Let's stitch our letters now. You can see that the lettering has thinner and thicker parts. For thinner parts I like to start from just the back stitch, and then for the thicker parts I switch to the brick stitch filling method. So first I outline the borders and then fill in using a simple back stitch, and I just place them as bricks. So here I'm creating a second line of back stitches, but this will be offset from the previous line. All of those stitches will be exactly the same length. Try to keep your stitches size consistent. This will create a more uniform and finished look. When you get to the point of your letters, when it becomes thicker, you want to go down on just one side of the line with back stitch. Follow the shape of the letters. You can see that I use only one row of back stitches for the areas where the letters are thin, and I made 3 rows for the places where the letters become wider. This is a pretty simple and cute way to fill the letters. It was really relaxing to stitch and I like the texture it can make. Couching stitch. Couching stitch is also a new stitch for us in this project, but there is nothing super complicated. Here is how I did it. One thread is laying on top of the fabric and another one is for stitching over it. I decided that it's a great idea to make a coaching stitch using metallic threads. I use all 6 strands. And for other thread, I chose a similar color of regular cotton threads. I used only 1 strand of cloth. I started by pulling up the metallic thread first, and then I come up with another strand. I was making short stitches and laid down the metallic thread the way I need. You only need to sew this metallic thread to the fabric in the shape of those letters. Try to make the distance between your coaching stitch equal. There will be places where you will need to jump with your metallic thread. For example, when one letter ends in one place and the next letter starts in another place. You can pull your metallic thread to the back and come up at the point you need. When I'm passing a crossing line, I just continue stitching, so then, when I reach this place next time, I go over it, and then it looks like it's on top of it. I just like it this way, it looks like 3D letters. Keep in mind that if you will decide to iron this embroidery before lacing, those threads can melt. So please test those threads for ironing on some other pieces of fabric and use a towel to not touch those metallic threads by your iron directly. I also recommend ironing it only from the back side of your embroidery. Satin stitch. The satin stitch technically is one of the easiest stitches, and it is the most popular stitch for the lettering according to my poll on Instagram. For this lettering I used DMC variety threads and 3 strands of floss. The direction of your stitches is very important here, so try to stick to one direction to make those letters look consistent. I made a guidelines for you, you can find it in your PDF pattern. To work the basic satin stitch, bring the needle up through the fabric at your starting point. Insert the needle again across from your original entry point, on the opposite side of the shape you are filling. Bring the needle up on the side of the shape where you started and go back down to the opposite side. Repeat the process to make additional stitches, always coming up and going back down on the opposite side from where your needle came up or went down. Your next stitch will always start across from the end of the last line. This also means that the back of your fabric will look the same as the front. The more you work this stitch, the better you will get at eyeing how to get the shapes you want. Until then, take a few stitches and see if it looks right. If they don't, just pull them out and adjust them. Take care that you don't pull the stitches too tight, or it will pull the fabric in and cause puckering. And one more tip, prepare the threads before stitching to achieve the smooth satin stitch surface. Just separate your threads one by one and let it to unwind before using. And one more tip, when embroidering, start satin stitch in the middle and move to the sides of the design. A satin stitch is used to completely cover a section of the background fabric. It's considered a filler stitch, so you can use it to cover teeny small and medium areas and make all kinds of shapes. Satin stitch makes a very smooth and polished looking surface. This stitch is sometimes referred as a flat satin stitch, because the stitches lay flat on the fabric. French knots. French knots are one of my favorite details that I can add to my projects. They can be used to make the center flowers and everywhere you want to add dots. It even can be used as a filling stitch for creating some interesting textures. For those letters, I made a kinda gradient using 3 shades of floss for each letter, and I'm using a big embroidery needle. And I use 3 strands of floss and I wrap 2 times. To make a French knot, bring your needle up through the fabric where you want to place a knot. Hold the thread using your non-stitching hand. Wrap the thread around the needle 2 times. To finish the knot, insert the needle back into the fabric close to the hole you came out of, almost in the same hole. Then slowly pull the needle and working thread through the wrapped loops to complete a French knot. Keep holding your thread using your non-stitching hand. This way you keep your loops tight and control the thread in order to avoid knots. You don't have to keep a lot of tension on the working thread, you just want to have enough to hold the shape of the knot, and the thread should pass through easily. Don't do it fast because you can make unwanted knots and mess, especially if you have a long thread. You can even keep your thread using your finger close to the knot, and then as you get close to the end, you can let go the thread. And you got a nice French knot, see? It's super easy, it just get more practicing and you become a pro after stitching my sampler page. All the color codes and guides illustrations you can find in my PDF pattern by the link in the video description. French knots are simple to do embroidery stitch, but it's also a little bit tricky, and I know that many people don't like French knots and avoid doing them. It can be very frustrating if you are trying to make French knots without knowing the technique. Trust me, it's a lot easier as you think. Once you get a hang of it, you will not find any excuses to avoid doing French knots, and I'm sure you will really love doing them. I'm showing more tips and tricks on how to make them properly and which mistakes people can often do in this video tutorial, so I really recommend watching it. And here we go! The final and the most advanced lettering style in hand embroidery is long and short shading technique. This is a principal stitch used in thread painting technique, also known as needle painting. It's a form of freestyle embroidery, often used for filling big areas and shading flower petals or bird feathers. I use long and short shading technique for those letters using 4 shades of pink, and I used only 1 strand of floss. This is the best way to create smooth color transitions. I always use the smallest needle from my set, number 9. The direction of the stitches will go where the lines flow. It will depend on the shape of the letters. I started with the lightest color, which is placed in the middle of the white areas, and I marked those sections with my heating erasable gel pen. When I'm filling it, I make long and short stitches and cover this area entirely, and I'm even going a little beyond my marks. I do it for a purpose, because I know that when I will be blending this color with the next shade, I will be stitching on top of it. The thinner the thread, the smoother the transition between colors, and the glossier the surface. So that's why I prefer to use only one strand of floss for long and short shading. Don't try to make a clear line when this color ends. The edges should be blurred, so that it's easier to mix it with another color. So I really recommend making the edges of your layers a bit rugged and keeping the lengths of the stitches inconsistent. I think this makes the blending a bit more natural. And it's time to start with the next color. I make a lot of long stitches approximately the same lengths. They are my guidelines. Then I fill in gaps between them, varying the length of my stitches. Stay in the line with your directions so that the stitches flow in the right way. Imagine it's a river and your threads are water that flows in the shape of these letters. In some places the river expands and somewhere it narrows, and your threads need to adapt to these forms. Also, you shouldn't start the stitches for a new layer in the same place where the stitches from the upper level, in the same hole, because the holes become loose and it doesn't look right. So I actually often split the stitches from the upper row. Most often I split them, sometimes I come up in between two upper stitches, and very rarely I come up when the upper stitches ended. The same way I stitch the third layer. You can see that I make my edges a bit rugged and the length of the stitches varies a lot. I change the stitches direction and follow the shape of the letters in such places, and I also make my stitches shorter. Long and short shading technique in hand embroidery is to fill a motif with shades of color that graduates from light to dark. This gives the stitches a 3D appearance. And the more close colors you use, the better, and the right blend of colors contributes enormously to the visual smoothness of your shading. The final darkest color will add some deep contrast and make those letters look complete. I stitched the rest smaller letters using the darkest shade only. I would probably use even more colors for such lettering, but the size of those letters is not so big, so it didn't allow me to do so. I know it may look too hard for you, but if you don't challenge yourself, you will not learn anything, right? We need challenges to grow, and it's not something to be afraid of. It is something that needs to be trained in the same way as with other stitch and embroidery techniques. And you must agree with me that it's too beautiful to not try it. This kind of lettering is a real challenge and a great practice experience. It is really fun to see how the colors blend and create together something unique. So if you are holding yourself from trying it just because you think it's too difficult for you, or you don't have any talent, or any other excuses you will find for yourself, just take a deep breath and make the first step. Take your hoop, fabric, needle and 3 or 4 favorite shades, and then follow the steps I just showed you. Practice, practice and more practice. Remember that even the needle painting masters have practiced a lot to get where they are now. So don't be discouraged, you can totally get there too. If this tutorial is too fast for you, I have a slower version available on my Patreon page. If you want to level up your embroidery skills and enjoy the process, consider joining my stitching club on Patreon, and you will get access to all my exclusive real-time tutorials and more than 80 embroidery patterns. Now I would like to ask you a few questions. What is your favorite stitch for lettering? And did you discover something new from my video tutorial? I would really want to hear from you and discuss about this topic. Please leave your comments below and I will try to reply right away. I really love to chat with you. Also, please let me know what would you like to see more on my channel. give me some ideas for my future videos. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching till this point. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to get notified about my new videos. And here are 3 more videos that I think you will love. You may also want to visit my channel and explore my other videos. I have a lot of useful embroidery tutorials and more great videos are coming. So see you soon in the next one.